Welcome to NTWC Live. I'm Alex Garcia, Director of the National Tropical Weather Conference. These programs are made possible by USAA, by South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, and Plylock's Hurricane Clips. All of these programs are a team effort. We have Bill Reed and Tim Smith with us to make these possible. And now, here's Tim Smith, live at South Padre Island.
there in New Bern, North Carolina, where I grew up. And I got the bug, you know. And then in the 80s, the early 80s, with cable television and some of the pioneering stuff that went on with that between Ted Turner and Turner Broadcasting and CNN and the Weather Channel, I was hooked, because now I could see this stuff 24 hours a day, especially the Weather Channel, learning, you know, from these OCMs, the on-camera meteorologists. It was like a classroom to people like me. And then I started experiencing hurricanes. I remember David in 1979, you know, then Hurricane Diana, 1984, Gloria, 1985. And in the 80s, of course, now we have 24-hour news, cable news. And so it was always there. And then it just goes on and on, you know. Hugo, 89. By this time, I'm in college trying to figure out what I'm going to do. And I was thinking I was going to be a music major. And I thought, because I play the keyboards, I thought I could sing. Turns out I can't sing. I can definitely play keyboards, but I can't sing. And I can't make money with it anyway, singing. So I thought I was going to go into music and have weather as a hobby, but I actually had it reversed. I just didn't realize it at the time. And so I was failing miserably at music because they weren't teaching me how to be a top 40 artist. And it was very like, you know, and so I was like, you know what, let me try something else. So I applied to NC State and Mississippi State. I was accepted. I was going to go into meteorology. But as they say, I met a girl at UNC Wilmington where I was taking music. I chose to stay at UNC Wilmington. We don't have meteorology, so I chose geography, which was the closest thing. And the rest, as they say, is history. I married that girl. I stayed in Wilmington. I started my career. And in 1996, we had our first, well, for me, my first direct interaction with a hurricane, and that was Bertha. And I had a weather station, as you can see in the picture there. It was a Davis weather station. I drove out to Wrightsville Beach to the drawbridge. It was closed. You couldn't go out to the beach itself. I wanted wind readings, you know. I wanted to know how fast the wind was blowing. I know that's not the best way to do it, but, you know, at 25 years old and probably 160 pounds of weight, you know, that's the best I could do. And everybody came over that was at a nearby hotel to take my picture, to talk to me. You know, what is that you're holding? What are you doing? And there was just all this interest. And I realized there's a lot more to hurricane reporting than just video and telling people what's going on. What Dan Rather did when he started many years ago, I think it was Carla, if I'm not mistaken. It may have been something different. All the way up to Jim Cantori, Dennis Smith, you know, at the Weather Channel, Mike Seidel, all the people we know in the field, Jeff Flock from CNN. There's more to it than just that, the reporting part. There has to be a data part, I thought. So I got on this crusade, if you will, to change that and include data in the sort of storm chasing, hurricane chasing world. And I also wanted to use those experiences of, if I'm going to be out in hurricanes, I felt like it was a responsibility to take what I learned and apply that to other people and share that with other people and try to help the greater good, contribute to the science, help people understand what's going on, what to expect, what the hazards are all about. As I'm continuing to learn, we got to let the public continue to learn. And so that's what I've done ever since. I graduated in 1995, degree in geography, focusing on meteorology, statistics, and hurricanes. So even though I'm not a degreed meteorologist, I'm kind of like a PA would be to a doctor. It's the best way to put it. Or an Episcopalian compared to a Catholic. It's close, but not quite there. You know what I mean? But I followed it, and I followed my passion, and hadn't looked back. So I'm going to pause for a second. Bill, anybody else, you got anything you want to jump in as I catch my breath? So that's where I started.
That's good. Yeah, and you were right about Dan Rather. It was Hurricane Carla.
Oh, good.
After the camera man down at the radar, weather office on the radar in Galveston.
Good. All right. So over the years, we had 5 hurricanes in North Carolina right when I started my career. Bertha, Fran, Bonnie, Dennis, Floyd, right here in the Cape Fear region. They all came to me, it seemed. There were some that were elsewhere, of course, but there was a smorgasbord of hurricanes. And so my career was launched. I started doing a lot of work with creating maps and public awareness campaigns. I began to work with different people in the Weather Service, FEMA, the Army Corps of Engineers, National Hurricane Center, started going to the National Hurricane Conference. I got to meet people, Max Mayfield, Stacy Stewart, Jack Bevan, eventually Bill Reed. And, you start growing from there, and you learn and you learn and you learn. And that's what I did. I was developing this awareness side, and I actually did some pretty groundbreaking work early on with computer-generated animation of how storm surge works. I received an award from FEMA in Washington, D.C., from James Lee Witt himself in 1999 for my work in this groundbreaking, instead of these cartoon graphics showing water, I was able to take photographs and add real water, so to speak, using digital technology. Now you can do it on your iPhone, and we have augmented reality. But back then, that was another big part of what I did. And corresponding with that was my desire to go out in the field and study hurricanes, observe them, study them, and then eventually research them in person. And so to do that, I got a vehicle, and let me see if we can get Zoom to continue to cooperate as I figure it out. Nicely done. I got an Isuzu Rodeo in 1999, and I outfitted it with an anemometer and pressure sensors. It's a mobile weather station. We've seen these, the movie Twister, 1996. People know all about this, so it's a storm chasing truck, whatever you want to call it, that's fine. I used it to collect data. If I'm going to video hurricanes, I want to also collect data in those hurricanes as well. This is just another shot of it that I'll pull up. And, oh, it's small. Let's see if I can, oh, look at that. I can zoom in. And we were even able to figure out how to get the mast higher up, which sometimes had problems because I would forget that I was driving around in a tropical cyclone and power lines were hanging down. And more than once, we've snagged that thing on low-hanging power lines. Luckily, those power lines were not energized. But, the goal was to collect data meteorologically and visually. I remember how many times over my career, especially early on, that Max would say, I really appreciate what you're doing, but if anything ever happens to you, I'm going to disavow that I even know who you are. So please be careful out there. And so early on is what everybody has to understand. Everybody that's ever done this, no matter where we are today, you had to start out using a video camera and going in and doing it in person. The earliest pioneers, Jim Leonard, Michael Locke, there are others, eventually to my generation, you had to do it in person. And there's really nothing wrong with that. People have filmed war all the way back since there was a camera available to do so. And Peter Jackson made a great movie about that, about World War I. The guy that directed The Lord of the Rings, right? He did this recreation and the restoration of the footage from World War I. They Shall Not Grow Old, I think was the name of that. And so this has been done for a long time with war. So why not hurricanes? We're not at war with hurricanes. We're just trying to survive them. And so that's my justification. People say, well, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible. I mean, let's face it, in the hurricane chasing world, nobody's been lost yet, and knock on wood. And if you use common sense, you can do it smartly. And so over time, the technology evolved, and funding started coming my way more and more. And by 2003, I'll share another picture here with you. I was working with Lowe's home improvement stores, and they helped to purchase our flagship vehicle, the very famous Chevy Tahoe. So now I had a larger SUV, heavier, obviously larger. It's like a mobile office. very well decked out with, anemometer, lights, all kinds of stuff. It's your prototypical, quote, storm chasing truck. And this was in, during its operation, over, 20 hurricanes or something like that, including the very famous Hurricane Charlie in 2004. That was the benchmark here. That we sat in that SUV, my crew and I, near Port Charlotte, out in front of the overpass and at first at exit 170 along Interstate 75, in the core of a Category 4 hurricane on purpose. And it absolutely, and I will never, ever change my story and act like, well, I didn't say that. It absolutely scared me to death. It was extremely unnerving. Imagine that if you're on a commercial flight, you remember we used to have those before all this, and you have 30 to 45 minutes of severe turbulence. I don't mean like, oh boy, I'm talking where you feel like you're going to die. You're not in control. There's no choices you can make anymore. It's completely up to fate. And you know how scary that is when you've been on a flight that has turbulence, especially severe turbulence. That's Hurricane Charlie sitting in an SUV in the core of a Cat 4 hurricane. It was not smart. That being said, we collected some great data. We really did. And I was on the phone with Max to tell him what we were collecting. And he literally said, as I was like, I couldn't even speak because I was shaking. My voice was shaking. I was so frightened. And he said, well, I hope you've seen the light, which was ironic because I could look up. You couldn't see blue sky, but the sun was shining down through the eye of Charlie. And I literally saw the light. So from then on, we decided we're going to figure out a way to do this remotely. And again, I'll turn it over. Bill, any thoughts as I am moving on through the time scale here?
Yeah. You might, how far in advance back then did you make a decision to deploy?
Pretty, with just we followed exactly whatever we would see from the National Hurricane Center, and it depended on how far away it was. So as soon as we see, I can't remember in 2004, did we have 5-day forecasts back in 2004, or were we still 3-day?
No, that was 2003 were the first practice of them, so we had them. But
okay. So as soon as we see the line, and I say, well, don't follow the skinny black line, but for us, that's what we do. Usually once we see that intersecting the coastal area, wherever it is, it's time to get ready to go. And it just depends on how far away it is. Texas takes a couple days to get to. Florida is a day trip for the most part. But for Charlie, we were down there already for Bonnie, which was about a day or two before. And we were in Panama City in that area. And then we worked our way over to Tarpon Springs and eventually thought Tampa Bay was going to get nailed, and then Bradenton Beach. And then we know what happened. It made that little change and on into Charlotte Harbor. And so we were constantly adjusting for that. And that was the biggest problem, is we were literally caught unaware of our surroundings. We had to make it up as we go along because we had places to stay elsewhere. In Bradenton Beach, we were going to work with, I think it's Manatee County EMS or somebody. We had a building to stay in. And remember, we didn't have any of this remote stuff. We still just had that vehicle to collect the data. But, we at least had a place to stay. But once it made that turn, and I'm trying to remember who the forecaster was, if it was Lawrence that issued that special advisory,
there on the hurricane liaison team, and several people kept pinging on him. It's intensifying rapidly and changed. And I remember Max was on the TV set that we had in there, and he just turned around and said, "We got to put something out." And
right.
Miles jumped right on it. Miles,
okay. At least I can remember most of these things. And we talked. We said, "Hey guys, should we, just take a loss and or we got time? Let's drive down there." There's no traffic. Nobody was anywhere. We were only ones on the interstate, really. And we went for it. And so we got off. But you know what we did? We knew we were not going to go out to Sanibel or Captiva. That's a suicide mission. At least we stayed away from the water. But nevertheless, an intensifying Cat 4 is a literal hair-raising experience. So after that, we started this idea of the Hurricane Landfall Project. You know, everything has to have a name. That's what we named it. And so I took that Isuzu that I showed you all, and I decided, because I had the Tahoe, I was like, well, what am I going to do with that old Isuzu? So we turned it into a crash test dummy, if you will. Got it painted bright yellow. Mako did like a $1,000 paint job and made it, you know, as close to fluorescent yellow as we could. We got a crane company here in Wilmington that does fabrication and other stuff to weld some things on it to mount equipment. And we decided we're going to leave it out in the next major hurricane on the beach somewhere, not the sand, but the beach front, right there at the ocean, and tie it down so it doesn't blow away or wash away when we are right at the onset, a little bit to mitigate it, but let it get destroyed while collecting data. And we'd work with the local officials, you know, we'd be smart about it. And we first did it during Francis, when it made landfall down there near Sewell's Point. And, you know, everything worked fine. It didn't wash the vehicle away. We got great data. It was a great test. Then it was Ivan came along, and we anchored that thing right in front of the pavilion in Gulf Shores, Alabama, worked with the Gulf Shores Police Department, you know, had a place to stay. It's the only time I've ever been in jail is when the Gulf Shores PD let me stay in their jail for safety. And you couldn't even hear the hurricane when we were in there. It was so well built. And the hurricane came in and wiped that Isuzu off the face of the earth, so to speak. And we you know, documented that using unmanned cameras. I bought video cameras and scuba housings and bolted them to the Isuzu, put one inside. I wanted to show people what happens when a hurricane comes in and smashes a vehicle. And we also recorded wind readings on it, and which were very well corroborated with wind readings from Dr. Josh Werman, who had his Doppler on wheels up in Foley. They were very similar wind readings, and I thought that was great, you know, that it matched. And it was a turning point. We captured some amazing video, even though most of the Ivan Fury happened at night, and we weren't there at the beachfront to do it ourselves. It was not possible to do. We would have died, probably, in messing around with that kind of storm surge. And so, you know, going forward, you can't keep leaving vehicles on beaches like that. That's not practical. So I sold the Isuzu, the wrecked Isuzu. I got it towed home. I sold it on eBay. True story. Somebody bought it for $5,000. I gave half the money to the American Red Cross, and I invested the other half into the future. And the future was unmanned camera boxes. And in 2005, with the advent, now working with Sprint, who's now T-Mobile, but story for another day, or will be in August, Sprint had the fledgling 2G, 3G network coming up where we had wireless technology. And so I was able to stream from our vehicle, the Tahoe, and build like a box that would have a laptop. You had an encoder, an inverter, big battery to power it all, and these little bullet cams. I figured let's build 3 boxes. They were very expensive back then, about $2,000 a box. And we'll put these out in hurricanes. And we'll attach the camera to something and leave the box. The box is a Pelican case. The brand is actually called Storm Case from Pelican, like a Chevy Tahoe. Pelican makes the Storm Case is what it's called. Great name. And it's waterproof. Even though we have to punch a hole in it, you can seal that back off. And yeah, we should be able to record hurricanes remotely. And Max loved it. He said, well, Mark, this is the only thing I could ever endorse or whatever, trying to do my Max impression. He's like, I can get behind this. I can support this. And I was like, great, because, I'm not going to do what I did in Charlie ever again. Not like that. Doesn't mean I'm not going to go and be in a Cat 4 hurricane. It's not going to sit in an SUV. That's stupid. So Katrina comes along. We put the boxes out, and we know what Katrina did. We lost all 3 boxes. I found one of them, and due to human error, this guy, I screwed up and it didn't record. I had the wrong input. It's all in a documentary I did about the '05 season, and I missed it, and it's like, oh, and then the other 2 boxes were never found, and we are pretty sure they worked. So there's the painful irony. The one box I found in all the rubble, it didn't work. The VCR that records the stuff and the laptop all had, I had the wiring backwards and I didn't know. Stress, lack of sleep, whatever, it'll screw you. And it did. And it was very painful to know that we could have captured a piece of history from point blank range and I screwed it up. It's just, hey, it happens. So we persevered. By 2008, same boxes and everything. I'm in your neck of the woods, Bill. We're down there for Ike, and we're working with CNN at this point in time as a media partner, and we set up 3 cameras for Ike. Everything worked great. We captured this amazing footage from Bermuda Beach and elsewhere, but mainly Bermuda Beach was just incredible. But again, most of Ike happened at night. And so we moved on, and the boxes really didn't change for a number of years until about 2013, 2014, when Wi-Fi cameras became prevalent. And that meant that we didn't have to use an analog video input to then digitize through a laptop and then stream it out. It takes a piece of the equation out. Now you can just use a Wi-Fi camera and a mobile hotspot and some kind of a power supply, and that's all you need. So starting in 2014, that's what we did. And we took what used to weigh 80 pounds and the size of a Foot Locker was now the size of a lunchbox, basically, a little bit bigger than a lunchbox. And it would run for 60 hours or so, 40 to 60 hours. And they were cheap, relatively speaking. And you can put them anywhere. And we also started using the Verizon network. It just seemed to be better with their LTE, the 4G LTE. And the very first significant deployment was Hurricane Arthur in 2014 along the North Carolina Outer Banks. Everything worked very well. And started studying winter storms and using those as platforms to test these things in the off season. So I'd go up to New England. I mean, winter storms, those nor'easters are like hurricanes' cousins. And 2015 was kind of a down season for Atlantic activity, at least for United States interest for the most part. Houston certainly got flooded there from Patricia, but we even used that. Flew out at the last minute. And I literally remember I put one of those camera boxes down in Brays Bayou in Houston and purposefully let the water submerge the camera. You actually see the camera go into water, and it kept running. It kept streaming for a few minutes until the water, you can't use your phone at the bottom of a pool, even if you have it in a Ziploc bag, because water absorbs radio waves. That's why it stopped working, but it didn't leak. And that water, Bill, that Brays Bayou will come up. You had the Memorial Day flood that year, and then Patricia, and on and on and on after. And it was a great test. I was like, holy cow, this could actually work. So by spring of 16, we had that big flood up there in Deweyville from the Sabine River. We deployed cameras there. And then lo and behold, Hermine, Cedar Key, Florida. And I set that camera box up at Cedar Key. I'd been there many times for other events. And it was absolutely incredible. The Weather Channel was showing that live. They were watching it at the National Hurricane Center. And we could see that storm surge come into Cedar Key, a record storm surge from a perspective that no one has ever seen before, much less broadcast live. It's one thing to record it. You get accidental recordings of videos in like a bank when a tornado hits it, or security footage, somebody's Ring door camera or whatever. Well, this is done on purpose to put the camera there, anticipating the impacts. The impacts come and we captured it. And that was very important because it showed that it worked. That camera lasted until the dock broke off and came and hit the camera and knocked it off its perch. And eventually it got knocked loose enough that it went off air. But we had something. And From there, it just got better and better. And now I'll just show you.
It's Tim. We're not seeing your screen. We're not seeing your screen. So I'm sure you're showing us some great pictures that we're not seeing.
Oh, no, I've actually just been yapping away. I'm getting ready to show you.
Just making sure. Just making sure.
Thank you. So let me show you what they look like. And I'm getting ready to do the screen share right now, in fact. So this is what they look like today. All right. So it's in fact, I should just grab one off the shelf real quick. Do that. So that's one mounted on a pole over in New Iberia for Barry last year. Briefly became a hurricane, but this is what they look like next to me. You know, it's a yellow box, and now we use Nest cams and, you know, a Nest security cam and these battery packs and a 4G LTE hotspot. We have 15 of them. We set it up during some of the, you know, all of the biggest hurricanes you can think of over the last several years. But there's a very important benchmark that happened in 17. In 2017 for Irma, we were still using the first generation of Wi-Fi cameras from a Logitech. And long story short, the network went out. The Verizon network was hammered and we lost the feeds. And I was texting somebody at the National Hurricane Center at the Storm Surge Unit as they were watching these cameras from Vaca Cut near Marathon, Marco Island, and Naples. They were expecting that major surge to come up, and each camera went off air right as the eye wall of Irma hit because it was knocking out the terrestrial network. And it was horrible. It was like I felt crushing pain, almost like a heart attack, every time I saw one of these go off air, that we were being beaten. And because the guy said, well, they're recording, right? We'll still see it. And I was like, if they're not streaming, it's not recording. It records to the cloud. And that was the end of that. I'm like, I'm not going to ever let that happen again. So we took a GoPro at the end of 17, learning from that defeat. I made a few modifications to it, which will just remain proprietary, as they say, because you got to figure out how to make that GoPro run for 3 days. Most GoPros, surfers need them for an hour, couple hours, 5 hours if you're in some Spartan race, you know, whatever, that Tough Mudder thing. You know what I mean? Most people don't need a GoPro to run for 3 days. I do, because you got to set them up, get out of there, whatever. So we made some modifications, figured it out, and lo and behold, it worked. By the time we got to 2018, we moved over to Nest cams. They're just more robust. They do better, etc. And they always try to come back on the air if they get knocked off. It was very nice. And we had backup cameras using GoPros. And so enter Hurricane Michael. Well, first Florence. Oh, I can't forget Florence. Florence. I set up a live cam, one of those I just showed you, and a GoPro up in Surf City. I'm going to get this video ready. We'll bring the video audio down, pause it. Come on, thank you. And Surf City, North Carolina. And this is what we were able to capture from that unmanned camera. This is from the GoPro. The live camera was over to the left off screen on a walkway that washed away on live television or live streaming, whatever you both. And I did that on purpose. You know, I was like, hey, let's see what happens, you know, when the walkway washes away. And then we put the GoPro over on a utility pole, and it ran for, you know, whatever it was at the time, 28 hours. It was designed to go. And we captured this amazing point blank footage of storm surge right there at the ocean interface. And it was incredible. When I shared this over FaceTime with this colleague of mine at the National Hurricane Center in the Storm Surge Unit, he was just stunned. But we didn't even know what was next, right? A few weeks later, Hurricane Michael. And I was exhausted. It had been a busy year. I'd gone to Hawaii for Lane. I wasn't very healthy back then, much heavier than I am now. And, you know, the year had really been catching up to me. I remember I had a cold, and I was just kind of like, ugh, you're running out of steam here. But, you know, trudged forward, went out, tackled Michael with all the passion and energy that I would anything. And we set up these units from Cedar Key, St. Mark's, the Indian Pass area, and then East Point and Mexico Beach. And Mexico Beach is one of those things that it's a redemption, that 14 years after Katrina, or whatever it was, 2018, right? And learning from that defeat, Michael was the redemption. We had a live camera, one of these boxes right here, set up in Mexico Beach, streaming live. And remember, this only records if it's live to the cloud. And it was right across from this restaurant there called Two Cans of Mexico Beach. I didn't know that place. I just thought, oh, this will be an interesting shot. It gives it context. It's right there on Highway 98. You could throw a baseball and hit the Gulf of Mexico if you throw it hard enough. This will be amazing. And we had one GoPro box left, and we weren't sure where to put it. We only had a couple back then. We have many, many, many more now. And this same person at the Hurricane Center texted me that morning, the morning of landfall, and asked me, do you have a GoPro, a backup camera in Mexico Beach? And I was like, not yet, but I was thinking about it. And he said, I really think you should, because we believe it's going to be ground zero, and you're probably going to capture a violent, rapid storm surge. Out the door. We left within 5 minutes from our hotel in Panama City, drove to Mexico Beach, set that GoPro above where the Nest Cam was, and the rest is history. And Michael came in and did what it did. There's a whole other story about how we went back and got it that night. That's actually a documentary that we did on Amazon. But we did. We went back and captured it. And as we walked through all that debris that night, the GoPro has a little red light on it that flashes. And I could see the red light from whatever, 100 yards away through the box flashing. And I knew it was still recording. The GoPro actually saw us coming to get it. And I swear, there's moments like my kids being born that you just are like, it's so emotional. I would rank that up there. I kid you not. This is like watching my kids being born, about we knew we captured everything that happened, because we're walking through the ruins of Two Cans. It's gone. There's beer kegs, timbers, it's just Mexico Beach is wrecked. And we're sitting there thinking the GoPro is still running. That means it saw how this happened. And that is extremely important. Not that it happened. Oh, you captured great video. That's going to be valuable. Yes, because it showed how it happened. Now the video becomes science. It always has been, but this was the absolute definitive moment. And for those of you that haven't seen it, this is what it looks like. So let me get it shared. Wait a minute, that's Florence, sorry. Michael, where are you, Michael? There you are. So for those of you that haven't seen this, it's absolutely unbelievable. We'll go through it. I'll skip around on the timeline. So this is probably about 45 minutes after we left. We set the camera up and we left, went back to Panama City and stayed in the safety of our hotel. Here is the eye wall coming in. The wind is absolutely just blasting through there. No sign of storm surge at all yet. It's because of the coastline down there, the bathymetry, etc. It's not like the Mississippi Sound where the storm surge comes in way early. There's the roof coming off that Two Cans restaurant. And again, there's not even any overwash at this location. So the wind increases, the eye wall comes in. You can hear buildings behind the GoPro being shredded, glass breaking. It's absolute mayhem. And the GoPro is mounted on a utility pole. Very important to remember that. Just a wooden utility pole. The eye wall hits, and it's just as violent as you can imagine. And I've got the sound turned off for obvious reasons. It's just so loud. And it held on. And we'll fast forward 30 seconds. The surge comes in. Very violent, exactly as the gentleman from the storm surge unit said it would. Very rapid, very violent, and a lot of velocity to the storm surge, as you can see there, like a tremendous fire hose or jet engine type. I mean, I have never seen storm surge like that anywhere on Earth. It doesn't mean it hasn't happened. I just haven't seen it. The rapid just incredible force of that water. And what do you expect? It's the right front quadrant of a Category 5 hurricane. And so this became a huge, huge success for the project. And we've used the video, obviously given it to the National Hurricane Center, the Storm Surge Group. They've studied it. It's been shown on television. My documentary, we use it for public awareness. FEMA's used it, Weather Service offices. And it's really interesting to contrast it to the surge from Surf City, which is like a water rise and then there's these rolling waves. Whereas Mexico Beach is like these jet-propelled, like horizontal waterfalls going at like 90 miles an hour. And no wonder it bulldozed buildings after the wind came in and did its damage. Just incredible. So I'm going to pause up to Michael now. Then we're going to get to 2018. Any thoughts from anyone on your side?
And there's a couple of comments that have come through on Facebook. One from Rich Johnson. He says, I applaud you for deciding how to do this remotely. As an OCM for many years, I wondered what type of impression that we were setting as reporters. We're sent many times to coastal areas and we're telling viewers to be safe. Your cameras are extremely useful in furthering the understanding of hurricanes. And then another comment here from Mike Phillips says, Mark, you've proved that remote camera technology can provide audiences with an incredible live view in very dangerous weather conditions. Why you think more broadcasters continue to send live crews to these scenes rather than rely on a network of remote cameras. So why do we continue to send these folks in?
Thank you. They tell the story. That's the thing. The cameras don't get to tell the story of what's happening. And to be fair, the networks and the local affiliates are not sending people down to the beachfront during the height of the storm. There's a balance there. Some people get closer than they should, but a vast majority of you all in the media do a really good job of keeping your people safe. And I'm not just saying that to placate the comment there. It's true. And yes, there are some that get closer. There are some that maybe act on their own, and we can't control them. But a vast majority of news directors and station managers and everybody involved really do have a rein on that, and they understand the risks. And so, I couldn't put a number on it, but it's the best way to describe it is most stations, network or local, do have safety as top of mind. And as with anything, there's always going to be a few exceptions. Luckily, to date, we have not had a major problem with anybody's health. We've had vehicles crushed or whatever. I understand that, but it's people are smarter than you give them credit for the most part, that go out and do this for a living. So far, keep our fingers crossed. All right, so I'm going to move on, and I appreciate those comments. So before I go to what we did in 19, and this is very relevant to that, in addition to the video data, I just want to show you, so you remember the picture of me, well, I showed it earlier. I'll pull it up one more time just to remind you, where I'm holding the anemometer. So I've come a long way, obviously, from this, all right? And so now, I really don't use a vehicle anymore to go into hurricanes for the purpose of collecting data. We use the vehicle just to bring the stuff. The Chevy Tahoe eventually, after 400 and something thousand miles, gave up, or at least I gave up spending money on keeping it running. So now we just rent vehicles and we go where we need to go. And we have these, and I'm going to pull this video up. Share it. So the weather data, I still absolutely want to collect this. And this is how we do it now. This is an R.M. Young anemometer. And this is something we came up with actually last year in 2019 through one of our crowdfunding supporters. I needed a way to mount these things on bridges and overpasses, because the hardest aspect of data collection is sighting the equipment. You got to sight it properly. It's got to be exposed, preferably high up, etc. And that's very difficult. And we've got really good equipment. it's expensive, way more expensive than the cameras. That anemometer alone is $1,500, but it's top of the line. So best way to describe it, I was trying to figure out how can we mount these things so I don't have to haul around a 10-meter wind tower. And so one of our crowdfunding supporters from the Raleigh, North Carolina area, his name is Scott. He said, well, there's a company that makes these orange clamp things that the DOT uses to put signs on Jersey walls, the barriers, the concrete barriers of our bridges and overpasses and interstates. You know what? I'll buy you one, send it to you and see if it works. And it absolutely works. I made some changes, retrofitted it. And again, I'll pull up that video and show you again. So that's what we're able to do now for wind. And there's the box that houses all the electronics. We use a little Raspberry Pi computer. There's the pressure sensor at arm young, the anemometer, and we can mount these almost anywhere on a bridge or an overpass. And think about it. Bridges and overpasses are high above the water or a roadway already, probably close to 10 meters, if not more, and they're wide open. Problem solved. So now we have 7 of those things, the clamp things, still have 2 weather stations because they're very expensive, and a whole bunch of cameras. We can do the same thing with these cameras. I'll share this picture with you. That same orange clamp device we retrofitted to accommodate our remote cameras. That is Interstate 10 near Baytown for Imelda. I was able to literally put the camera in the middle of the interstate to watch what goes on with Imelda, the big flood event in parts of Southeast Texas last year. So that has really allowed us to go mobile more than ever before. So last year, the deployments were first Barry in Louisiana, and it was more of a kind of a warm up, if you will, kind of testing things and kind of getting the cobwebs out. And again, we tested that new device along Highway 90. We put one in Morgan City, right down on the flood wall. Those concrete barrier things, walls, whatever, the device will handle up to 12 inches wide, and then you can tighten it down from there to a minimum of 4. And so that gives us a huge opportunity here. So we put a system in Morgan City and out on Highway 90 near New Iberia. And I forgot, I want to show you one thing. In 2018, just to show you some of the data that we have collected, this is the wind and pressure trace from Michael. We put an instrument package out on the Hathaway Bridge between Panama City and Panama City Beach. And we recorded a peak gust to 119 miles per hour. And this is in the western edge of the core. So we're not even in that right front quadrant. Again, the equipment is very expensive. We wish we owned more of the meteorological equipment. We're getting there. Nevertheless, the pressure reading got down to just a little bit above 940. And the pressure gradient from where this was to where we were, and of course where the eye went over, was very, very steep. Sharp pressure drop over a very short distance. That's why you had the winds that you did. So we do have really, really robust data capturing and recording capability. We share that data immediately and sometimes real time with the National Hurricane Center. I tweet that data a lot. And so we were ready to go for 2019 is what it all came down to. So back to Barry. We set up for Barry. Barry had a lot of potential of maybe a big flood event. Some of it came to fruition, some of it didn't, of course. You know how these things go. Then, basically it was a couple other events, but the big one was Dorian. And just to answer anybody that's curious, no, I never considered going to the Bahamas. One of my crew members was thinking about it. He was getting kind of antsy. Do you think we should go to the Bahamas? I was like, I'm not going to the Bahamas, dude. I don't think you should either. And he didn't, but we know a couple people that did. And that's just, I'm scared. I'll be honest. I'm not going to lie. Oh, I didn't have the money or whatever. No, man. I'm not going to the Bahamas for a category 4 or 5 hurricane. I don't care if I bring, every one of these that I own. It's not like I can get to the Bahamas and then get out. Once you're there, you're probably stuck. And so that was never an option. So, you know, I flew to Puerto Rico. Dorian kind of sidestepped it. And that was, I don't want to say a waste of time, because you always learn something. Got up to Miami, rented a vehicle to go back to the Carolinas. It's all a long story. You know, why'd you fly back to Miami? Went ahead and got the vehicle, got to the Carolinas, loaded it up, went back to Florida. And we know Dorian just kept teasing the Southeast after ravaging the Bahamas. And we saw all the destruction and the incredible data collected by Jim and Josh in the Bahamas. You know, that's excellent that they did that, but I wonder how many nightmares they've had since then. That's just, again, I can't do that. And I waited for it in where I should have just stayed to begin with, and that was the Outer Banks of North Carolina. So before I get to the conclusion and show you what we got as our benchmark for last year, any other comments, questions, or thoughts before I kind of wrap this up in the final 10 to 12 minutes?
All right, Mark, we've got a couple of comments in here real quick. We've got about 7 minutes left in the program. Marcel says, what are the next steps now? What do you expect to need to improve? And Lou Fincher says, greatly improved how Chaser of Media should capture storm live. Applaud your efforts in making this done with safety in mind.
Yeah, Lou has kept me alive more times than I probably would care to admit, you know, just from pride, but he knows what I'm talking about. Lou Fincher, great guy. So I'll answer the question from Marcel as I wrap up. So let me just jump to the end. So I ended up in the Outer Banks, and I had a couple live cams, and so we set up equipment from Puerto Rico to Florida to South Carolina, North Carolina. We put out everything we had. So that was great. We actually covered a couple thousand miles of coastline with unmanned cameras and weather stations. And that was really cool. I applaud that effort. But I could have just stayed in Buxton, North Carolina the whole time, and I saved all that time and effort, but it's all a learning process. So what I did, and this is the benchmark event from last year. I'll share this and we'll wrap it up here. I had a couple of live cameras along the Outer Banks, one in Rodanthe on the Pamlico Sound, not the ocean, because the surge here was going to come from the Sound, the shallow body of water that's similar to Lake Pontchartrain, as an example. And I had another live camera down near Frisco, both of them looking at the Pamlico Sound. I had my backup camera, the GoPro, in Buxton at a little marina, kind of boat ramp area, whatever. And this is the morning of September 6th, and the camera is out like right next to the Pamlico Sound, which is over on the right-hand side. And here's what happened. The eye came over. The wind was blowing from the ocean across the Sound and pushed all the water out of the Pamlico Sound. And then the eye came over, the wind switched direction. None of this is time-lapse. This is all real time. On the right-hand side over here, you can literally see the water pouring back in. The wind probably jumped up to 90 to 100 miles per hour weather flow. Had some great data. I did not have any weather stations on the Outer Banks. Again, they're so expensive. I just didn't have any. But I did have this, capturing through the GoPro cam that storm surge coming in from the Sound was really, really remarkable. The water came up very rapidly. I remember seeing the National Hurricane Center tweeting about the rapid rise of the tide gauge down at the U.S. Coast Guard at Hatteras. And sure enough, there it is. This is visual evidence of that. The camera was on a pole out there real close to the bulkhead, and the waves actually began hitting the box. And it just kept going, probably rose, 5 to 7 feet, maybe 9 feet in some locations, it looks like. And it just, again, I've captured surge from the ocean. Michael was, category 5 right at the ocean there, the Gulf of Mexico. But sound side surge, I thought this was really important to be able to capture this and show how rapidly it happened. And that's a very, very dangerous thing. And there's no way to capture this any other way. and truly remarkable. But it also shows other things. Look at what we're seeing in this video. That home is elevated. You know, the air conditioning system right up there, I don't know if you can see it there in the upper left, that might have some issues, but that's why you elevate your houses, folks. That's mitigation. And I know it goes without saying, well, yeah, if you're going to live down there, you got to elevate your house. But it shows, hey, look, it works. That house made it through this, but as Bill Reed says, the higher we build, the hurricanes just get stronger or something like that. So you never know. But it worked in this case. And really, really remarkable footage there captured from Dorian. I had a pressure sensor in there with it, a Kestrel pressure sensor, and it recorded about 959 millibars as the eye went over. And I drove down in my other vehicle that I've got like an old spare Chevy Tahoe that one of our partners bought for us a few years ago. And I drove down to Buxton in the eye and recorded some stuff myself. Kind of broke my rule, but you know, wasn't a major hurricane. I know the area, so I kind of rationalized, and I got about 959 as well on my pressure sensor, which would make sense, and shared all of that with the Hurricane Center. I'll show you the wind and pressure trace, or just the pressure trace, sorry, real quick, and we'll wrap it up. So this is our pressure data. And that 958.1, that was the lowest from the pressure sensor inside the little box in Buxton, North Carolina. This is a great graphic that one of our partners put together, Brent. Thank you, Brent. And it was a heck of a season. So where are we going to go from here? Very capable. We have 15 live camera systems now, 15 of these guys, mostly thanks to our crowdfunding partners. We really appreciate that. 12 GoPro systems, 2 weather stations. Didn't even talk about the weather balloon project. That's a whole other thing. We want to be able to launch a weather balloon with scientific equipment and a couple of GoPros into the eye of a hurricane. We've done it during Nate, but that was at night. Now we want to do it during the day. That's going to require a lot of careful planning, and you got to be safe because you got to be in the core if you want to launch in the eye. So we got to make sure we're very careful about that. But the future looks very bright. We appreciate all of the encouragement and support of people over the years. And we're ready. We are ready for this season. We're going to take the pandemic social distancing precautions into consideration, very much so, and try to be safe this season in what looks like a very busy season ahead.
All right. Well, thank you so much there, Mark. We're running out of time. We've got about 30 seconds left in the feed. Want to appreciate you being here. We will have you back to talk about that balloon project. Tim, are you still out there live?
We are here. Let me turn the camera back on. You should be able to see us.
All right, you've got just about 30 seconds.
Open.
The island is open. Come visit. We're at 25% in restaurants now. Expect the governor to open us up all the way this weekend. Come back to South Padre.
South Padre, it is the place to be. We are at Pier 19, and this is the host of the National Tropical Weather Conference, Alex.
All right. Thanks so much for joining us here, folks. Don't forget tomorrow, we've got one more coming up. We're